Secretary Shulkin, welcome to the program.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Let me just first start by asking you your connection with what we're seeing on Capitol Hill today. And that is yet another expert who was on the NSC talking about what happens when political appointees and others take over from expertise. When you see what Vinderman, according to his opening statement anyway, is saying, how does that resonate with you today?
Well, the story that I share in my book about what happened to me is extremely similar to what I'm seeing happen again. It's a repeat pattern of behavior where dedicated career employees, people really trying to serve their government as public servants, are being interfered with and seeing things that frankly shouldn't happen. And I'm so glad that there are so many people willing to speak up and talk about what's right.
Well, why do you think that's happening now? I mean, you've obviously had a good deal of time to reflect, to write, and now you're speaking about it. Just before we get into the nitty-gritty of what happened to you, why do you think more and more people are coming out now whose jobs are on the line and at stake by coming out? They're currently serving.
I think people are seeing a real risk to our democracy and seeing the trust being eroded within government and feeling a real duty. People who serve in government often have other choices. I came from the private sector myself, but our belief is that citizens need to do the right thing to make this government work, and speaking out when they see something wrong, it's an American value.
So, Secretary Shulkin, let me ask you about what happened to you. In your book and in op-eds and the like, you have written about a toxic and chaotic and subversive situation when it comes to outside appointees or inside appointees doing end runs around policy appointees such as yourself. What happened to you who, after all, you were specifically chosen by President Trump, even though you started as VA Secretary or in the VA under President Obama?
Yeah, I was one of the very few, the only one in the cabinet who had worked for President Obama, and I was confirmed 100-0. And I had hoped that we would continue to keep veterans issues and doing better for our country's veterans apolitical and outside of all the gamesmanship that I was watching happening in Washington. But unfortunately, that just wasn't the case. And a few political appointees in the organization, in the Department of Veteran Affairs, thought that the Department of Veteran Affairs should be moving in a different direction towards privatization. And I just wasn't willing to go along with that. I didn't think that was the right thing for veterans or what veterans wanted. And so we had a clash. And ultimately, President Trump ended up changing his mind and said he wanted to go with a different direction for a different secretary.
So let's just go a little bit from the beginning. We're going to show now a little bit of tape of President Trump, essentially talking about you. This was back in June 2017 when things were going well.
I also want to express our appreciation for Secretary Shulkin, who is implementing the dramatic reform throughout the VA. It's got to be implemented. If it's not properly implemented, it will never mean the same thing, but I have no doubt it will be properly implemented. Right, David? Better be David. We'll never have to use those words. We'll never have to use those words on our David.
Well, I mean, it really could not be more of a hearty endorsement from the president to you. You did have, just describe your working relationship. I mean, you did go to the White House, you had meetings, you had a pretty good working relationship.
Well, we were getting a lot done. And frankly, we were fixing a lot of the things in the VA that had been broken for decades. And so that very first year when I was secretary, we got 11 bills through Congress in a bipartisan way, and the president signed them. And frankly, I think the president enjoyed seeing all the progress that was happening. But as you're seeing, even today, there are so many people now bringing their opinions and their political ideologies into policymaking that, frankly, it gets derailed. And it's really important that the work of government stay focused on what's right for the people it's serving and not get into these political derailments.
So describe for us then, what was the political drama that surrounded you? I mean, there were political appointees, there were also friends of the president's, people who were your subordinates inside the VA, who, as I said, were doing end runs around you. How did that happen? What started to make your tenure there go off the rails?
Well, I think that, I wasn't some of the initial political appointees' original choice for secretary. I think their choice by the president of selecting me was somewhat of a surprise. And so I wasn't easily controlled. I was following a bipartisan path. I was following what I thought was right for the veterans, and that frustrated them to the point that they ended up doing essentially internal sabotage, leaking false information to take away from my ability to lead the organization, creating enough political turmoil that ultimately it did end up derailing my tenure as secretary and, frankly, stopping some of the progress that we were making. And the real issue that was the central issue was this issue of, do we continue to support a strong VA, or do we move much more rapidly towards privatizing a system that, frankly, I think is part of our commitment that we've made when our men and women go off to defend us, that we're going to be there for them when they come back home.
Well, here's the thing. I mean, you have that view, and you took that view to the president at a particular time, and he tended to side with you. You were speaking about the importance of what you've just told me, that it can't all suddenly be privatized, that, as you say, veterans deserve a huge amount, and it can't all happen overnight. And while you were having a meeting with the president, he called a friend and an advisor who happened to be a Fox News contributor. His name was Peter Hegseth, supporter of privatization, asked him to weigh in. And incredibly, Hegseth apparently said, according to what you say, I have the secretary here with me. He says, we can't do this all now because it would cost us over $50 billion. So, Pete, we have to take our time. So the president basically kind of pushing away those who might be on the privatization now bandwagon. I mean, that was a victory for you. How, again, did that start getting whittled away? What happened after that?
Yeah. When I had a chance to directly talk with the president and present my views and give him a full picture of why I was making the decisions that I made, I generally found his support. What was very hard to control was where he got his other information from. And I think we see this, that the president, and many presidents will do this, reach out to people that they know, their advisors, and get information. The information that the president was getting from outside people, and the example that you just used of the Fox News reporter is an example of that, was often very different than the information that I was giving him as secretary. And ultimately, the president needs to decide which information he's going to rely upon and make his decisions based upon. And, I think that I had no control over where he was getting all this different information and the sources that he would choose to get it from.
It should be said that before being secretary of the VA, you were in private practice, right? I mean, you were a physician, you are. You had turned around many or several significant failing hospital institutions. And so you came to this with a huge amount of expertise. And then we've just described the support you had from the president and then how it was being whittled away. Let's just show just how you learned you were being cut out of the loop. This is another meeting in the White House about an upcoming meeting.
We're having a meeting tonight at what we call affectionately the Southern White House. Seems to be the most convenient location. Everybody always wants to go to the Southern White House. So are you going to be at that meeting? You heard about it, right? It's going to be great. All about the VA.
Yowza, what was going on in your head there? I mean, you said you shook your head no, and then you nodded your head yes. What was happening as he said that to you?
Well, I was confused, as probably everybody. That happened to be a nationally televised meeting where that happened. How could you have a meeting about veterans policy and the future of veterans care in this country and not have the Secretary of the VA there? That began to allow me to see some insights into how the decision-making was going on. And it was always somewhat of a surprise when you worked in the administration, not knowing exactly where the president was getting his information from. And, you know, it was certainly a source of concern for me because I wanted the president to have the right information and the information that was coming from the secretary, who was a Senate confirmed appointee in the cabinet to make sure that the president was getting the right information.
Secretary Shulkin, I just want to refer back. The president has basically poured cold water over Colonel Vinderman, who's testifying today, saying he wasn't on the call. I don't even know who he is. And as you know, your critics will be coming at you because of the ethics lapse that you were, confronted with. And we have basically the Washington Post headline: VA chief took Wimbledon river cruise on European work trip, wife's expenses covered by taxpayers. Now, there was an investigation. You say a lot of this was distorted or false, but the internal report said that you did mislead agency ethics officials. Tell us about that and how you think that is going to be, used to damage your credibility now on this issue.
Well, first of all, I wrote the book to give the details of that, so I'm going to let the readers make up their mind. I was completely transparent in everything that happened, and I maintain that absolutely everything was done the way that it should be done. But that's something about 2 years ago. I think what we're really seeing is that there's an effort underway to discredit people who speak out and are doing it as a sense of duty. And I knew when I wrote this book, and I knew when I would speak out, that there will be people coming after me, attacking my integrity and my ethics. But I feel that it's my duty as an American citizen, having had the chance to have had this view from the seat that I had, to speak out, because I believe public service is in real danger if we don't support the people that are trying to do the right thing, and that we need a reset in Washington to create an environment where we can all perform better and make this government work better for its citizens.
And Secretary Shulkin, you talk about, sabotage, and it's almost like Keystone Cops. I mean, it's almost like a comedic if it wasn't so utterly serious. There's this famous copy machine incident where you actually found out that you were being actively sabotaged, undermined, plotted against by these appointees, political appointees, who, again, were your subordinates. They were working for you, not vice versa.
Right. I'm a physician. I'm trained in science. And so while many people in my agency were telling me, watch your back, there are people in your agency working against you, I frankly didn't spend much time paying attention to that. I had too many important things working on behalf of veterans to worry about what I thought were games, until one day they happened to leave a memo detailing their exact plan to have me removed. They left it on a copy machine, and a staff member brought it to my deputy secretary, who brought it to me, where it clearly outlined in writing these political appointees were planning to have me removed, my deputy secretary removed, my chief of staff removed, my acting undersecretary removed, and replace them with people that they thought were more ideologically aligned with their views of where the VA should go. And so at that point, then I just couldn't ignore it, and it was really that type of hard evidence.
And then you learned that you were actually fired by tweet, and that has happened quite a few times. Secretary David Shulkin, thank you very much indeed for joining.